And you are podcasting with Gary DeMar. Let's figure things out.
In this episode of Bible Prophecy Under the Microscope, I'm going to be looking at a new book that has come out. It's called The Doctrine of Last Things, and it's by Dr. Sam Waldron, and its subtitle is An Optimistic All-Millennial View. Now, some years ago, I was involved in a debate with Dr. Waldron and Dr. Hamilton, James Hamilton, out in Reno. They had asked Ken Gentry to do it, but Ken apparently was too busy, and so they asked me to fill in to do it. And it was an okay debate. But what I did find out in that particular debate, Sam Waldron was following the interpretive methodology of John Murray on Matthew 24, and I covered my views of Murray's work. Murray's work was in one of his. He didn't really write a lot of books. He did on the imputation of Adam's sin. He wrote a book on divorce. He has a commentary on Romans, which has been replaced in the New International Commentary series published by Erdman's. But John Murray was a very, very good systematic theologian. I think his exposition of Matthew 24, which is found in the collected writings of John Murray, the second volume, Select Lectures in Systematic Theology, called The Interadventual Period and the Advent, Matthew 24 and 25. And I'm not going to cover that here. I have written a chapter in my book, chapter 4, titled Sam Waldron, John Murray, and the Olivet Discourse in my book, Prophecy Wars, the Biblical Battle over the End Times. And so that chapter deals with Murray's presentation, his exposition, and I found it wanting, and going up against John Murray is a big deal, but it's a typical. Some of these things reply to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Some of these things apply to what we traditionally call the Second Coming. I did not find it convincing, and Sam Waldron pretty much takes the same position that John Murray takes, but I'm not going to deal with that here. I want to deal a little bit with Waldron's comments on preterism in his book, The Doctrine of Last Things. The book is laid out very well. It's more of a kind of a systematic theology of eschatology. There isn't what I would describe as a verse-by-verse exegesis of passages. To me, that's always the starting point. It's pretty easy to go through, pick a prophetic system, get the guys who typically agree with you on that position, string a lot of their views together with what you believe. You've already adopted a particular system, and on the basis of that, you run with it. And it's a presentation of that. There's a lot of historical analysis in here as well, and it covers, there's general introduction, the two ages, general judgment, and it covers a great deal of material. I just don't like the fact that there really isn't a lot of exegesis in here. The kind of work I've done over the years, say on Matthew 24, I have gone through and done a verse-by-verse study of Matthew 24, 2 Thessalonians 2, Ezekiel 38 and 39, Zechariah chapter 12. I've done work on Matthew the rest of chapter 24 after verse 34 and chapter 25, Matthew 16, 27, 28. And so I think that's what you have to do first. You really have to do the exegetical work before you can go in and commit to doing a systematic theology. This was one of the things that Gary North, his specialty was economics. He wanted to know what the Bible had to say about economics. And so what he did is he sat down, and did an entire study of the Bible on economics. And he went through every passage. He felt every passage that dealt with economics in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. And on the basis of that, then he wrote his kind of systematization of economics based upon all this exegetical work he had done. It was 35 volumes of work from Genesis to Revelation on economics. And that's kind of what you have to do if you're going to talk on a system. You really need to do the exegetical work first. Now, this is not to say that Dr. Waldron has not done exegetical work on this, but there's just it's not convincing. For somebody like me and others who kind of do the same work that I do, we would not be convinced by those things. Somebody who is not familiar with, say, a preterist argumentation, they certainly would not be convinced. And again, that's kind of typical. When I write a book dealing with things from an exegetical basis in Matthew 24. People can't just say, well, I disagree with you. I said, well, you need to tell me how you disagree with me first by telling me what my position, what your idea of my position is, and then deal with it exegetically. So there is a chapter in here on it's called Hyperpreterism, Has Christ Already Come? And that's kind of a bit unfair, because there are lots of preterists out there who are not full preterists. For example, Ken Gentry is not a full preterist, and Ken Gentry has done a ton of work on Matthew 24. I mean, he's written extensively on it. He's got this 2-volume commentary on Revelation. I'm guessing that Sam Waldron did not have access to it, and it would have been a job to go through it. But let's be fair here. I'm looking at the footnotes in the book, and he does mention J. Stuart Russell's The Parousia, which was published in the mid part of the 19th century. And okay, that's fair, because a lot of people do appeal to Russell's book. But let me just say, there's been a great deal more exegetical work other than what we find with Russell. And then, of course, as I mentioned, he mentions Murray and appeals to Murray on Matthew chapter 24. And as I'm paging through this, who else does he deal with here? He deals with R.H. Gundry, and who's not he's certainly not a dispensationalist. I don't know if he's a pre-mill or not. He's written on the topic, though, and that's it's something. But it really doesn't deal with the preterist argument at all. He does have in his bibliography. He does have Chilton's Days of Vengeance. Gentry is nowhere to be found in his bibliography, which is kind of surprising. He does have Marcellus Kick's An Eschatology of Victory, which is a combination of Matthew 24 and Revelation 20. And he's got Gary North's Unconditional Surrender. And let's see here, O. Palmer Robertson, who was not really a preterist. He's got Rushdoony, The Meaning of Postmillennialism. Let's see, anybody else here that Sproul's Knowing Scripture. It was interesting. He's got Sproul's Knowing Scripture in his bibliography, but he does not have Sproul's The Last Days According to Jesus. It's perplexing to me that someone who is going to do something on a topic like this, man, you got to deal with the people who really are the centerpieces of that topic. And while Russell's book in the 19th century, and a lot of people do appeal to it, there's been so much additional work that has been done since Russell's work. I quote from Russell periodically, but most of the work I've done in, let's say, on Matthew 24, I got started in it with with Marcellus Kick's commentary on Matthew 24. But there's so much more material on this. And in fact, if you go back to the 19th century, you'll find numerous works on exegetical works on that are what we would call today preterist. I mean, it's phenomenal. We're publishing one particular work by Samuel Lee. The title is Eschatology. And you read through it, it's just exegetical, takes these verses one at a time. And so it's again, a little perplexing that Waldron doesn't actually deal with preterists who have written on the topic. And since he's dealing with hyper-preterism or full preterism, there are guys out there who are full preterists. I mean, Don Preston has certainly written a ton of stuff on full preterism. Seems to me, if you're going to do this, that's what you should do. You should take the best guys. When I say the best guys, I would say the best representatives of a position, and you should have to deal with them. It's easy to deal with people whose arguments aren't that great or misrepresent a lot of the positions of these guys, but it's just, I don't know. I don't want to say it's sloppy work, but it's just incomplete. Then on page 378 of his book, The Doctrine of Last Things, Dr. Waldron writes this. He says, to understand hyperpreterism, it is helpful to remind ourselves of the identity of preterism. Preterism was originally a method of interpreting the book of Revelation originating with Roman Catholicism. Jesuits offered preterism as an alternative to the historicist method of interpretation that identified the Roman papacy as the beast or Antichrist. It is also to be contrasted with a system of interpretation known as futurism that was also presented by the Jesuits as an alternative to historicism. While futurism referred to the events of Revelation primarily to a future period of tribulation at the end of this age, preterism declared that with very few exceptions, its prophecies were fulfilled by or before the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Much of postmillennialism has a strong preterist tendency. And the only footnote here is, see, for example, David Chilton, Days of Vengeance. And I'm thinking, this is sloppy. This is sloppy work here. It's all of the works that I have found over the centuries. And preterism goes back a long way, all the way back to Eusebius, especially on Matthew 24. And you can find things on Zechariah 14. You can find things on 2 Thessalonians 2, the man of lawlessness. It goes way back. And not one of these works will you find any reference to the Jesuits or Lucanza or Ribera. None of them. You don't find any of that in there. These guys are just doing pure exegetical work. And this is kind of poisoning the well here. Oh, well, this is something that the Roman Catholics came up with, and we know the belief system of the Roman Catholics, and so they really can't be trusted. So right at the start of this, by poisoning the well here, everything that follows from this is, oh, well, this is a response to Roman Catholicism. It is not. If you're going to deal with preterist arguments, you better do your work exegetically, and Sam Waldron does not do that in this book. And he deals with, it's interesting, he deals with a lot of preterist texts here, but it's kind of giving the impression here, well, no one else has really dealt with these texts from a preterist perspective. He certainly doesn't list any of them. John Lightfoot, who was present at the Westminster Assembly in the 17th century, man, the guy was a preterist on so much. That's kind of astounding here that, again, that Waldron is making this Roman Catholic link, and it's obvious that John Lightfoot was not a Roman Catholic. Same thing with John Owen. John Owen on 2 Peter 3 is pure preterism, and lots of other passages as well. You got John Brown on Galatians, which is a preterist, also on Hebrews. So again, I just think this is it's incomplete. I'll be as kind as I can on this. It is incomplete. He does deal with a couple of passages. He's got Matthew chapter 10, verse 23. But whenever they persecute you in this city, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you shall not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. And on that one, I think he's pretty good. He says this is something local. We know that this refers to the events surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Matthew 16:28, truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who shall not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. I have an extensive chapter in my book, Prophecy Wars, on this passage, on Matthew 16:27 and 28. And I demonstrate that this refers to events surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And here's what I do. I said, here are other commentators who take the same position on this as I have taken, and I would not put them in what we would call the hyper-preterist or full preterist camp. I cover Matthew 16:27 and 28 in Prophecy Wars, the biblical battle over the end times. In chapter 17, are there two comings separated by 2,000 years? That is Matthew 16:27 and Matthew 16:28. And some say that Matthew 16:28 refers to AD 70, where Matthew 16:27 refers to the second coming. That's Ken Gentry's view. I don't take that position, and I reference a number of commentators who also do not take that position. And so this is not a Roman Catholic thing. This is an exegetical issue, and the exegetical material on this is pretty solid. And again, if you're gonna write a book dealing with eschatology, and one aspect of it, and that is preterism and hyper-preterism, I just say you've got to deal with the people who actually take that position and show some of the history of it all. And because, Waldron is not adverse to showing the history of certain eschatological positions. I think that's very important. And so, again, there is more to full preterism than Russell's parousia. In fact, Russell's parousia is not a full preterist treatment. He's not a full preterist, as where everything in the New Testament referred to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. So even to use Russell for this is misappropriated. So you've got to, again, if you're going to do stuff like this and be an authority on stuff like this, you need to do your homework, and that homework is both exegetical and historical. I found this comment on page 385 of Waldron's The Doctrine of Last Things, and this is kind of an assessment of the hyper-preterist view based upon the appeal to Russell. And he says this was his kind of a fourth assessment. He says, hyperpreterism consistently carried out empties the New Testament hope for the modern believer. If the rapture of the living saints, the resurrection of the dead saints, and the coming of Christ are already past realities, if all prophecy is really fulfilled, then upon what do we base our hope for the future? The hyper-preterist has no hope to offer Christians for the future. I'm thinking, where does he come? Based on what? Preterists I know believe that when you die, you go to heaven and be with Jesus. That's your ultimate hope. Your ultimate hope isn't some rapture that's going to take place in the distant future. That your hope is immediate. At the time of death, you're going to be with Jesus. To live is Christ, to die is gain. And so just because someone believes all the prophecies in the New Testament have been fulfilled in that generation, doesn't mean there isn't any hope. In fact, it is the reality of hope. It's like all the Old Testament referring to the first coming of Jesus, the messianic hope, they were all fulfilled. Was that the end of things? Well, absolutely not. It was the beginning of things. All kinds of things happened. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. And so, again, this is kind of typical. Oh, everything happened, all the fulfillment took place in AD 70, so now there's no hope. There's a great deal of hope. Full preterists believe that when you die, I don't know if all of them would believe this, but majority of them would believe that when you die, you get a new body. And that's when you get it. The futurist perspective, of which Waldron holds on to, would say that you don't get your new body until Jesus returns at the end of history, and then he raises all the dead bodies up out of the ground, most of which no longer exist anymore. And so in both cases, there's a new body. Full preterists will say you get a new body at the time that you die, and it's a brand new spanking body. You get it right away. You're not a disembodied spirit for thousands and thousands of years, where a non-preterist would say, well, you don't get your new body until Jesus returns. But in both cases, you get a new body. For the full preterist, you just get it a lot sooner. You're not disembodied. It's just like the seed analogy. You put the seed in the ground. It's not the seed that grows. It's what is the result of the seed. The seed in the ground, in essence, dies, disappears, and something comes up out of it. It's not the perfect analogy, but it was the analogy that was available to Paul at that time. People understood. Put a seed in the ground, and out of that seed, when it gives its nutrients and so forth, something new comes out of it. And there's not a gap. You don't put the seed in the ground, and then 1,000 years in the future, with that seed still in the ground, you're now a plant. No, you put that seed in the ground. Right from that point, there is a stem, and there are leaves, and there are flowers, and so forth. So again, this idea that someone who believes that all the prophecies have been fulfilled in the New Testament is and say that you take your person's hope away. I'm thinking, no, they don't. What happens if that's the case? The person who dies now, his full hope isn't until Jesus returns again. Where the full preterists would say your full hope when you die is immediate, right at the time of death. He then talks about how hyperpreterism involves the supposition that hundreds of thousands of living saints were raptured into heaven at the coming of Christ at the destruction of Jerusalem. How could such a thing occur and there be no record of it? And on this, I agree. Now, there are some full preterists who believe that there was a physical rapture before that generation passed away. I do not believe that. I don't think that's what Scripture is describing. So again, he's taking a small element of what some full preterists believe and making that this is what all full preterists believe. There are many who believe that what was taking place is the old covenant saints. Those were the ones who were raised sometime within that 40-year period before the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Yeah, what happened to those old covenant saints that were in Sheol? And a lot believe that those were the ones who were resurrected. And then after that has taken place, any Christian who dies after that, they get a new body immediately. The body's in the ground, doesn't have any significance anymore, turns to dust, and then what happens? You get a new body after that, and that happens to every believer from now on. There's much more I could deal with here, but it's pretty much all the same. A great deal of misrepresentation and incompleteness, and just concentrating on just very narrow focus of what preterists believe and using that as the standard for everything. Again, there's a great deal of prophetic work out there from preterist writers. I've written from a preterist perspective for quite some time. I got Last Days Madness, Wars and Rumors of Wars, Is Jesus Coming Soon? My Prophecy Wars book. the Gog and Magog prophecies. I have that as well. You've got what Kim Burgess has done, the 2 volumes on hermeneutics and the covenant. James Jordan on Matthew 23 through 25. John Bray, Matthew 24 fulfilled. These will show you exegetally what the Bible has to say about prophecies related to time. The time is near. These things are about to take place. And all of that, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So again, you can get the Doctrine of Last Things, an optimistic amillennial view, but if you're not well attuned to what the arguments are by different prophetic systems, I think you'll be led astray, and you'll be ill-informed as well.
Thanks for podcasting with Gary DeMar. Please subscribe and share this with anyone you think really needs to hear it.